At 6 a.m., I stepped onto my deck and froze. 8 strangers were cannonballing into my $30,000 pool like it was a public water park. And right in the middle of it all, our HOA president, Karen Whitmore, sat on my inflatable unicorn, sipping from a glittery tumbler, as if she owned the place. My backyard gate was smashed open for the 4th time that month. My custom pool filter choked on someone else's hair. Wet footprints streaked across my deck, and the air reeked of cheap sunscreen and entitlement. Just community bonding. Marcus, she called, waving like a queen granting mercy. That's when it hit me. The woman who ran this neighborhood didn't just make rules. She believed she was the law. 3 months earlier, I'd moved here after a brutal divorce, poured every cent of my settlement into this house, and built that pool as a fresh start. It was supposed to be peace. Instead, it became Karen's playground. She'll fine me $1,500 for unauthorized lights I'd bought from Home Depot. She broke into my backyard for safety inspections, and when I told her to stay off my property, she called the cops claiming I'd threatened her. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules, it was about control. Karen wanted my pool, and she would twist every law, every loophole, and every connection in this city to take it. But I wasn't just any homeowner. I'm an electrician, detail-obsessed, patient, and armed with cameras. So when she turned my dream yard into a weapon, I decided to turn the tables. Because if Karen wanted a war, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with a man who knows how to wire every lie to explode in your face. This is the story of how my HOA president turned my pool into her empire, and how I turned her empire into a prison cell. At 6 in the morning, the sun had barely stretched over the rooftops when I froze on my deck staring at 8 strangers cannonballing into my $30,000 backyard pool. Chlorine mist rose in the cool dawn air, while HOA president Karen Whitmore, self-crowned queen of Pinehurst Estates, lounged on my inflatable unicorn like it was her royal throne. Wet footprints trailed from my smashed gate straight to my cracked filter, choked with their hair and sunscreen. Just community bonding. Marcus, Karen called out, sipping from a glittering tumbler as if she owned my backyard. Rage throbbed through me as I gripped the small bag of pool shock powder in my hand, harmless but potent enough to turn their morning swim into a neon green nightmare. That powder was just the symptom of something deeper. This wasn't about a pool anymore, it was about power. How did my sanctuary become her playground? It began 3 months earlier at an HOA meeting that would turn my quiet new life into a full-blown neighborhood war. Back then, I walked into that meeting like a naive newcomer, still bruised from a divorce, but hopeful about my fresh start. I'd bought this home with my settlement money, in a suburb where every house looked the same, each homeowner proudly paying their dues to keep up community standards. The only thing that kept me sane through 60-hour electrician shifts was my pool, a custom saltwater beauty lined with imported tiles and LED lighting. It was proof that I'd survived something ugly and rebuilt something beautiful. That night, the community center smelled of burnt coffee and plastic ambition. The board sat in a stiff line behind a folding table, and at its center, Karen Blonde Bun twisted like a crown, acrylic nails tapping her papers like warning shots. Next item: unauthorized pool installations and safety violations, she announced, eyes locking on me like a predator spotting prey. My heart stuttered. Unauthorized. I had every permit, every inspection, every document neatly filed. Yet there she was, holding up photos of my backyard taken without permission. LED lighting installed without HOA architectural approval. $1,500 violation. The room spun. Every other house has the same lights, I said, rising so fast my chair scraped concrete. She smiled that plastic realtor smile. Those homeowners received proper approval. You did not. Rules apply equally, sweetie. That word sweetie landed like a slap. Behind her, her husband Derek nodded proudly, his smirk saying, "This is our turf." After the meeting, I chased her into the parking lot. "You can't just walk into my property," I said. "Oh, don't stress," she said, twirling her keys. "HOA emergency access provisions. I'll inspect personally tomorrow." And before I could protest, her SUV door slammed shut, leaving me in a cloud of exhaust and disbelief. When I got home the next evening, my stomach dropped. My gate hung twisted off its hinges, my pool chemicals were half empty, and my furniture soaked like someone had thrown a pool party. On my deck sat a citation. Multiple violations identified. Immediate corrections required. K. Whitmore, HOA president. The kicker: that weekend, Karen's extended family arrived with towels and barbecue grills, setting up camp in my yard like conquerors. Kids dove into my pool while adults drank on my deck. When I confronted her, she floated past on my raft with a martini in hand. "Just ensuring community standards," she purred. "Can't properly test pool safety without thorough evaluation." That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about pool lights or safety rules. Karen wanted access to my pool, and she was going to weaponize every clause, every technicality, to get it. The HOA was her chessboard, and I was the pawn she planned to knock over. But if she thought I'd fold quietly, she was about to find out how dangerous an electrician can be when he's had enough. 2 weeks later, things got worse. One morning, a police cruiser pulled up to my driveway. Officer Martinez stood at my door looking uneasy, with Karen hovering behind him, clutching tissues like props in a courtroom drama. "Mr. Thompson," he said, "we've received reports of threatening behavior toward a neighbor." Threatening behavior. I stared at her, stunned. "You mean when I told you to leave my property?" Karen dabbed fake tears. "He said I'd regret continuing inspections." I felt unsafe. Behind her, Derek's relatives nodded solemnly like trained backup dancers. I could taste the bitterness of injustice rising in my throat. As the officer scribbled notes, I remembered something my divorce lawyer once told me: document everything. In court, the one with the records wins. That night, I spent $400 at Best Buy on security cameras, high definition, motion triggered, cloud stored. Every angle of my yard became a watchtower, and the very next day, those cameras caught Karen in all her glory, her entire family lounging in my chairs, Derek grilling steaks, Karen leading a well-dressed couple around my pool, pointing out community amenities that were actually my property. When the woman tested my pool water like a buyer, I finally understood Karen was using my backyard to sell real estate. That evening, I printed the screenshots and knocked on her door. "Funny thing, Karen," I said, laying the photos at her feet. "Looks like you're using my pool to close deals." "Pretty sure that's called fraud." Her mask cracked for the first time. "They were just prospective buyers." I hit play on my phone. Her voice crystal clear. "Residents enjoy shared access to premium aquatic facilities, very exclusive." She went pale. "You're recording private conversations. That's illegal wiretapping." "Wrong again," I said. "One-party consent. My property. My rules." Her door slammed, rattling her windows. For the first time, I'd seen fear in her eyes. And that was the moment the war truly began. Karen's revenge came a week later, precise and poisonous. I was under my truck, cursing at a stubborn alternator, when my elderly neighbor, Helen Kowalski, shuffled over holding an envelope that looked too official for comfort. "Marcus, honey," she said, voice trembling, "you might want to see this." Inside was a notice from the City of Phoenix Code Enforcement Division. Someone had reported me for unpermitted electrical work and safety hazards. An inspection was scheduled for 9 a.m. the next morning. I didn't need a psychic to know who filed it. Karen had turned from self-appointed pool inspector to full-blown saboteur. The next morning, an inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, authority radiating from his ironed khaki uniform. And right behind him stood Karen. "Mrs. Whitmore called in concerns about potential code violations," he said. She mentioned unlicensed work. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Unlicensed. I've been a licensed electrician for 12 years. For an hour, the inspector combed through my setup, testing every outlet, every light, every breaker. Karen followed like a vulture, pretending to observe for safety reasons. When the inspector finally closed his folder, his expression softened. "Everything here is code compliant, Mr. Thompson, perfect work." He turned to her. "Ma'am, filing false reports wastes city resources." Karen's fake smile cracked like old paint. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. My phone had been recording the whole thing. That afternoon, Derek showed up in his company truck, pretending to inspect my pool for insurance purposes. "Routine liability review," he said with a grin. "Neighbor complaint triggered it." The problem: Derek didn't work for my insurance company. He was trying to create fake documentation, another layer of harassment wrapped in official paperwork. When I pointed it out, his grin faltered, and he retreated faster than he'd arrived. But minutes later, my real insurance company emailed me. Subject: policy review required. Neighbor safety complaint filed. My stomach sank. Karen had filed a legitimate complaint to my insurer while Derek distracted me with his fake inspection. Now, my pool was labeled an attractive nuisance, and my premium was doubling unless I built a 6-foot privacy fence. She'd turned her trespassing into evidence against me. It was a brilliant, malicious trap. I spent that night pacing the yard, staring at the pool that had become the battlefield of my life. Karen's laughter echoed faintly across the fence, mocking, victorious. I felt like I was drowning in bureaucracy and lies. That's when Helen appeared again, holding a mug of chamomile tea and the calm authority of someone who'd seen too many legal battles. "Marcus," she said, "you've been fighting her game by her rules. It's time to flip the board." Helen was 73, retired paralegal, and sharper than any lawyer I'd met during my divorce. We spent hours at her dining table surrounded by stacks of HOA documents, old bylaws, and faded signatures. "Found it," she whispered finally, tapping a highlighted paragraph. Section 4.3. Homeowners may designate private amenities as community accessible for shared liability and maintenance. I frowned. That sounds like making it worse. She smiled a sly, knowing smile. Or making it hers. Her plan was genius. If I legally declared my pool community accessible, the HOA and not my would become responsible for its insurance, maintenance, and supervision. Karen would lose her exclusive control, and the floodgates would open to every neighbor who wanted a swim. It would turn her private playground into a public circus, and, legally, she couldn't stop it. The next morning, I filed the paperwork with both the HOA and my insurance company. The effect was immediate. My premiums dropped back to normal, and Karen's phone calls started furious, shrill, and endless. When I ignored them, she stormed over in person, heels clicking like gunfire. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Marcus?" she shouted as I hammered a wooden sign into my lawn. "Community pool, all residents welcome. Just following HOA Covenant 4.3, I said, keeping my tone even. "You've been treating it like community property anyway, so I made it official." Her jaw dropped. "You can't just, this will destroy property values." I smiled. "You told your clients community amenities? Raise them." Her face twisted, cycling through confusion, rage, and dawning horror. I could almost see the exact moment she realized the trap had closed. That weekend, word spread like wildfire. Families I'd never met lined up with towels and floaties. Kids screamed with joy as they dove into her pool. My pool, the one she'd weaponized and lost in one stroke of paperwork. Karen stood on her porch, martini trembling in her hand, watching toddlers and teenagers take over her private paradise. "You've destroyed this neighborhood," she yelled. "No, Karen," I said. I shared it, but I knew this wasn't the end. The look in her eyes wasn't defeat, it was calculation. And sure enough, just days later, Helen called at 2 a.m, voice shaking but triumphant. "Marcus, you need to see this. Now." Her kitchen was lit like a crime lab when I arrived. Papers covered every inch of the table, bank statements, invoices, corporate filings. "Karen's not just a bully," she said, tapping her screen. "She's a criminal." As she scrolled, the pattern emerged. Payments to companies that didn't exist. Landscaping fees for work never done. $47,000 for community pool maintenance in a neighborhood that had no community pool until I filed that form. The company receiving the money. Desert Oasis Pool Services. Owner Derek Whitmore. Helen's voice hardened. "They've been stealing HOA funds for 3 years, paying themselves for fake repairs and upgrades, $93,000, maybe more." My skin prickled with rage. "And my pool was supposed to be their next cash cow," I said, realizing how deep the manipulation went. Derek's email, which Helen had retrieved through public access, confirmed it. "Once community access is approved, we can bill the HOA for supplies, cleaning, and equipment upgrades, pure profit." That was the moment everything changed. This wasn't neighbor drama anymore. It was organized theft with a trail of evidence. Helen handed me a flash drive. "This contains everything, but Marcus," she warned, "once we move forward, there's no going back. They'll fight like animals when cornered." I looked out Helen's window toward Karen's house. The porch lights glowed, sterile and perfect, but underneath that suburban polish was rot. I wasn't just fighting for a pool anymore, I was fighting for every neighbor she'd stolen from. "Then it's time to stop playing defense," I said. "We go on the attack." The war wasn't over. It was just entering its most dangerous phase. By the next morning, Helen's dining room looked like a war room. Coffee cups, spreadsheets, and HOA documents sprawled across every inch of polished wood. The hum of her old desktop filled the silence as she mapped out a plan that could topple Karen Whitmore completely. "We can't just drop this in a police inbox," Helen said. "She's got people everywhere. City offices, judges, real estate cronies. We need a clean hit, multiple angles." Her eyes gleamed with a strategist's hunger. Within hours, Helen recruited reinforcements. Linda Chen, a CPA from 3 streets over with 30 years of forensic accounting experience, and a personal hatred for creative bookkeeping. Linda arrived armed with a laptop, calculator, and righteous fury. "She's not even subtle," Linda muttered, scanning invoices. "No bid approvals, no signatures, no audit trail. This isn't bookkeeping, it's robbery with paperwork." Her calculator clicked like a ticking time bomb as she tallied the total, over $93,000 siphoned into Derek and Karen's fake companies. The three of us sat in silence, the number sinking in. $93,000 stolen from neighbors struggling to pay mortgages, seniors on fixed incomes, single parents skipping vacations to afford HOA dues. Helen leaned back, exhaling sharply. "If we do this right, she'll never step foot in another boardroom again. But we'll need more than outrage, we'll need timing." We drafted a 3-phase plan worthy of a courtroom thriller. Phase 1. Submit evidence to multiple agencies at once. County Attorney, Insurance, Fraud Division, and the State Board of Accountants. Phase 2. Media exposure, courtesy of Helen's cousin, Robert Kim, an investigative reporter for Channel 12 News. Phase 3. A public confrontation at the upcoming HOA annual meeting, legally required to have at least 50% homeowner attendance, and cameras would be rolling. For 6 days we worked in secret. I gathered every recording and photo. Helen organized affidavits. Linda compiled a timeline of false payments linked directly to the Whitmores. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. True repairs never made. Phantom landscaping contracts, non-existent safety installations billed at thousands apiece. The Whitmores hadn't just been greedy, they'd been methodical. Then came the sabotage. Monday morning, my pool pump was ripped open like a carcass. Wires cut, panels fried, control system soaked in chlorinated water. My cameras caught everything. Derek sneaking through my fence at 3:17 a.m. with bolt cutters and a flashlight. His precision wasn't random. He destroyed the exact parts that would look like an accidental failure. When I confronted Karen later, she called with crocodile concern. "Oh Marcus, such a shame about your pool. Derek could fix it for you emergency rates." Of course. That was the final straw. I called Officer Martinez, who'd grown tired of being Karen's unwilling enforcer. When he saw the footage, his expression hardened. "This is deliberate vandalism," but she spin it. "Claim it was an inspection gone wrong. Keep recording, Marcus. She's running out of lies to hide behind." By Wednesday night, Derek was caught on tape again, this time photographing his own sabotage for a fake insurance claim. Proof of fraud, caught in glorious 4,000. But Karen wasn't done. Thursday morning, a woman in a fake county uniform arrived at my door claiming to be a health inspector. Her badge looked real, her story rehearsed, but one phone call to the county office exposed the truth. No inspection scheduled, no employee by her name. Another stunt, my cameras captured her face, and the car's license plate, more ammunition for tomorrow's showdown. Friday arrived heavy with desert heat and tension. The HOA's annual meeting. My cameras were half blinded with orange paint from another late-night attack. Linda's laptop had been stolen, and several neighbors received anonymous threats, warning them not to attend. Karen was isolating me piece by piece, erasing witnesses before the main event. But Helen wasn't rattled. She showed up at my house that afternoon, holding a small black recorder. "Robert's been investigating Karen for months," she said. "She thinks she's ambushing you tonight, but she's walking straight into his story." That evening, the community center buzzed with bodies and whispers. Every folding chair was filled. News vans lined the parking lot like sharks circling blood. The smell of sweat, coffee, and desert dust hung in the air. At the front, Karen sat at the board table in a navy blazer, posture regal, smile rehearsed. Her husband stood behind her with 3 men, probably lawyers or hired muscle. She called the meeting to order with performative grace. "Good evening, neighbors," she began, her voice sweetened with artificial sincerity. "Before we discuss budget matters, I must address ongoing harassment from a certain resident spreading false and dangerous accusations." Her eyes flicked toward me. "For months, this individual has stalked my family, made threats, and manipulated recordings to create chaos in our community." Murmurs rippled across the room. Cameras turned toward me. She was painting me as the villain in front of everyone, and, with that temporary restraining order she'd filed, she knew I couldn't approach her to respond. "He's even violated court protection orders," she continued dramatically. "We must stand united against hostility." Then a voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Excuse me, Mrs. Whitmore, Robert Kim, Channel 12 News." All eyes turned to the back, where Robert stood holding a microphone, his camera crew poised. "Can you comment on the $93,000 in unauthorized payments from HOA accounts to companies owned by you and your husband?" The room erupted. Gasps, whispers. The board froze, eyes darting toward Karen, who stammered, "That's misinformation." Robert stepped closer. "These are public records," he said, producing a folder. "Invoices, bank transfers, business registrations, Desert Oasis, pool services owner, Derek Whitmore. Whitmore Design Solutions owner, Karen Whitmore. Care to explain why the HOA paid these entities for services never rendered?" Karen's composure cracked. "This is slander. You have no proof." "Actually," Helen said, standing tall with the dignity of a judge, "we do." She held up a flash drive, its metallic sheen catching every camera light. 3 years of invoices, email correspondence, and surveillance recordings, all verified. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop humming. Derek lunged forward, shouting about defamation. But before he could finish, Officer Martinez stepped through the doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies. "Mrs. Whitmore, Mr. Whitmore, you're both under arrest for embezzlement, insurance fraud, and filing false reports." The officers moved with quiet precision, reading rights as cameras captured every second. Karen's scream echoed off the sterile walls, sharp and desperate. As the crowd erupted in stunned disbelief, I stepped forward, holding the small bag of pool shock powder I'd carried all week. "You wanted my pool to represent the community, Karen," I said, voice steady. "So now it does." I poured the powder into a nearby water bottle, swirling it until the liquid turned bright, electric green. "Sometimes," I added, lifting it into the spotlight, "you need a little color to make people see the truth." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Karen was let out in handcuffs. Derek shouting empty threats as news reporters swarmed. For the first time in months, the neighborhood buzz wasn't about rumors, it was about justice. 6 months later, I stood on my rebuilt deck watching the sunrise over a new community pool built from Karen and Derek's restitution. The air smelled of cedar and fresh chlorine, laughter echoing from families who'd once been divided by her lies. Helen was now HOA president, Linda the treasurer, and Officer Martinez had a plaque on the new facility named after him. Even Robert S. Expos had sparked HOA reform bills across the state. As the ribbon was cut and applause rippled through the crowd, I smiled not out of revenge, but relief. My pool was peaceful again, the water calm and clear. The woman who once ruled this street with manipulation and greed was serving 3 years in prison. Derek's license was gone. Their house sold to a young family who asked permission before stepping foot in my yard. Helen joined me at the fence, her tone soft but proud. You see, Marcus, corruption only thrives in silence. I looked over the pool, where sunlight danced like liquid gold. And justice, I said, thrives in the sunlight. The taste of victory wasn't bitter, it was clean.